You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.
Welcome back to On the Way Home, the podcast where we explore the people, perspectives, and conversations shaping belonging, housing, and community across Canada. I'm your host, Emmy Kelly. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Deliah Bernard, partner at Root Strategies and a trusted advisor on Indigenous relations and reconciliation at both national and community levels. Deliah has worked across government, policy, and community spaces to help advance meaningful reconciliation through collaboration, relationship building, and culturally grounded approaches to leadership. Let's jump in. Welcome, Deliah, on the show. We're so excited to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emmy.
So we're going to start the show with our signature question. What does home mean to you?
Home, I think it really means, safety, community, your support system. Where do you go to recharge? I think as someone who lives away from their home, I'm from Nova Scotia, I live in Ontario, you need to find those spaces and other ways and other ways to surround yourself with things that make you feel like home. And I think all of those aspects help define that in different ways.
And can you share with us a little bit about your personal roots and identity? What shaped your commitment to working alongside Indigenous communities? And tell us a bit about your personal journey.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I'm Mi'kmaq. I'm First Nations from a community called Waigoma First Nation in Nova Scotia. And so when I was in high school, I had gone to school for the first time off reserve when I was in high school. And one of my teachers at the time had recommended that I apply for this program called the Forum for Young Canadians. And so it's a program that brings people across the country to Ottawa to learn about the parliamentary process and how government works. What does the House of Commons look like? What does it mean to work together to pass legislation and all these kinds of things. I think that was really my first opportunity at being introduced to politics outside of my community politics back home. And so I was able to come to Ottawa for a few days, meet my local member of parliament at the time. And I feel like I had really gotten the political bug, I guess I could say, after that point. And I think as someone who comes from community, it was a really, I think, easy segue into wanting to work in that space. I had eventually applied for a program called the Summer Leadership Program and had worked in the office of the Minister of Crown and Indigenous Relations on the federal side. And she really, and her office really helps open the opportunities for me to work in this space, particularly on Indigenous issues across the country. And that had led me to work for Indigenous Services Canada, and then eventually the Prime Minister's office as an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And so I think that I could never have seen that journey coming as someone coming from Nova Scotia and to where I ended up. So I'm very grateful for that journey.
Wow. That is a journey. And you just dropped in there the Senior Indigenous Affairs Advisor at the Office of the Prime Minister of Canada. So I'm wondering if there's any interesting stories that you can share with us from your time in that role. That sounds pretty exciting.
It was very exciting. I think, no 2 days were the same. I think in my role itself, it was national in scope. And so I was kind of responding and supporting issues that were happening across the country and every part of the country as they were arising. And so I think some of the most interesting conversations or things that, I had the privilege of being a part of really was, I think, sitting in those rooms or taking meetings as an advisor within the Prime Minister's office. And I think the comfort that gave not only to leadership, but I think other Indigenous people that I would meet with on what that meant to them. The first time perhaps they are meeting with someone who is Indigenous on the other side of the table, someone who has the ability to be able to help advance some of their issues and concerns that they're working on. I think one of the biggest things is, of course, welcoming the papal visit and the apology of the Pope, and being a part of what that looked like, and working with communities on ensuring that, healing and what healing means to them and would mean to them is incorporated into that. I think having the ability to bring also the Prime Minister into communities that have never ever welcomed a Prime Minister ever before. I think those moments were so special and so impactful, and being able to help coordinate that with the community was something I'll never forget.
When you think about reconciliation in everyday life, what does meaningful reconciliation look like in practice? What are, process gaps? What still needs to change? What's working well?
Big question. So I think, everything moves at such a quick pace, and as much as we also at the same time things move slowly. And so, I think in the work that I do, there has to be opportunity for feedback. There has to be opportunity for what a true partnership should and could look like. And that also means, accommodation. That means being informed. That means co-development. We're seeing that a lot now, in terms of development in this country and that type of things. But, in terms of the true reconciliation and what that looks like, it does mean that things will, maybe take a little bit longer, but we're doing them the right way. And we're doing them the right way from the outset, rather than trying to then fix and accommodate later, which, isn't the right kind of way of doing things. So I think, opportunity for feedback and some accommodation and being, properly informed.
You've worked across big national initiatives that supported Indigenous communities during moments of crisis and healing. Could you tell us about some interesting things related to these initiatives? What are some of the lessons that stayed with you, and what truly helps versus what unintentionally causes harm?
We have a big country. We have such a big country, and so much, I think, regional variety within that too. I think some of the the biggest things that I've seen, especially coming out of, in this on the way home, or home and safety in general, thinking about the red alert, the red alert system, to the kind of provincial and federal collaboration to searching the landfills in Winnipeg, to being able to support on the COVID-19 response in partnership with Indigenous communities. I think all of that really is, you can't do that without the local community along that journey with you, and being, I think, responsive to that. I think as an Indigenous person working in that role, there certainly were tough days. There certainly were, I think, just as many good days that helped keep me going, kept me going. And I think when we start to make decisions without those voices at the core of it, we start to have to backtrack, and that's the last place that you want to be in. And I think being able to have those conversations at the outset just makes things that much stronger.
Brilliant. So much clarity, which I really appreciate from your experience. What does it look like to genuinely center Indigenous voices in leadership, decision-making, and cross-sector collaboration? And I say this to with organizations, individuals, et cetera, that are listeners tuning in. We know that Indigenous populations are disproportionately impacted in spaces of homelessness and housing need. And so anything you would share with us there on how we can continue to do better and center those voices in our decision making.
Mm-hmm. I think having a genuine seat at the table for those conversations, and an opportunity for those voices to share their experience and their perspective as well. I think, we as a society or as a country or, in specific sectors can only be more successful when we have those different experiences, those different lived experiences incorporated into the direction that we're taking, and being able to share, in my case, someone who grew up in my community on my reserve, back home, and bringing the real life on the ground experiences of seeing homelessness and seeing those suffering from addictions, and seeing all of those impacts, and informing the way that I then respond to some of those things in the work and on the policy side. I think that being able to actually take advantage of those opportunities to broaden, the way that we think, we can only be better for it.
And for organizations or individuals who want to build real relationships with Indigenous communities, what are a few practices you've seen that build trust? And also conversely, what tends to break trust?
Honesty. I think that is the top and key piece that make or breaks relationships. Relationships are built on trust. They're built on honesty. And I think being able to have that as a two-way street where, you're seeking feedback, but you're also seeking a safe space to give that feedback. And so being able to, to have some of those candid conversations, there'll be a lot of honesty on the table and being able to accept that feedback and vice versa. I think that is the approach that I took in my role, especially in government with communities. It is very difficult to establish trust and relationships with the government, for many, many reasons. And I would always come out the offset, introducing myself and where I come from. And I understand the issues you're coming to me with, and I will be honest about how I can help you, if I can help you, and where I can send you to get maybe some more support in that regard. So I think honesty.
How do housing, dignity, and self-determinations connect in Indigenous communities? Why is housing about more than just shelter?
It's so much more. You're so right. It's so much more than just shelter. It is safety. It is being able to raise your family. It is being able to raise your kids, hope in your community or in a space that you get to decide. And I think being able to have a home, a safe place that you can call your own, is so important. And I think that there's so much more work to be done in this space, as you know. But I think so many of those experiences, being able to escape unsafe situations, being able to, which makes it even harder, especially in smaller communities, especially in remote areas. You are then forced to leave your home. You're forced to leave, where you come from, sometimes out of fear, and being then settled into an unfamiliar place, and being able to try and to re-navigate an unknown space. And so being able to then create spaces and create allyships, create spaces for individuals looking for that support, you can start to then build yourself back up kind of from the ground up. So I think each of those aspects is it all kind of ties into how we all want to support each other and be better allies.
Like right now, you are a partner at Root Strategies, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct.
And what does that day to day look like? Are you still focused on moving the needle for Indigenous communities?
Mhm. So so I launched Root Strategies, which is my business. It's a national Indigenous Affairs agency. So I'm still very much in the Indigenous space, hoping to take what I had learned and empower communities in a different way. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing is helping to build up the capacity, empower communities in their decision making in the economic development area right now. There are a lot of things happening in this country, and I think a lot of shifting towards wanting to partner with communities, and communities are being, and leadership are being very overwhelmed with that and trying to navigate, respectful relationships. How are we going to take care of both our people and our land and the environment for generations to come, but also trying to ensure that we are part of the economic solution in this country, whether that be through workforce development, or being a part of the economy itself. And so we are helping to kind of to bridge those conversations in a way that helps both sides achieve what they would like to achieve.
And like, how do you feel? Do you feel like we're on track, things have really improved, or that this work is exhausting and it's an uphill climb, we have a ways to go? I mean, I know those are two kind of extremes, but I mean, if you look at the whole objectively.
Yeah, I am very hopeful. It is tiring. I think the work that we both do, and the work that so many do in this space is, especially as someone who comes from community, it does add another layer, both onto your shoulders, but also into your mental weight as well. But I think what I am so encouraged by is that now we're seeing more Indigenous-owned businesses being a part of the conversation. We're seeing more, post-secondary graduate rates across the country for Indigenous peoples are going up, which means that they're going to be a bigger part of the economy itself. And so, what excites me, that keeps me going and all of that is to see that, it's small incremental change, but it is change nonetheless. And, it will only be better, as we keep going and moving into the space. So, for me, I'm excited by that, and it ignites me for sure. And I really enjoy what I do.
That's incredible. When you look ahead to the next decade, what kind of change do you hope to see in how Indigenous communities are supported, respected, and empowered? And well, you touched on what gives you hope, but if you have more to say, for sure. Otherwise, tell us your 10-year vision of where you want to see our nation.
Thank you for that. I think even in the last 10 years, and a significant portion of that, I had been working in the federal government. And so I think to kind of see where we were as a country 10 years ago and where I hope to see us in 10 years from now, I think we are well on our way to that. And I think enabling and empowering Indigenous communities to be decision makers, to truly be decision makers, and have the ability, without the weight of all of the other issues that surround them, that they're dealing with day to day in their communities, isn't taking 100% of their attention, and that they can participate fully. And so, where I see us in 10 years is more communities having the ability to do that.
Any last words of wisdom that you would share with our listeners? And I'll just throw out personal interest, but probably listeners as well. From your time in the Prime Minister's office, is there any really interesting story or experience or exchange or anything that you would share? Or visit that you made that was riveting? Or
I think there are so many things in the course of a day or a week or a month or in the years that I had spent there, I think some of the most impactful pieces that I take away from that is, one of them I would say is, I think I had touched upon it a little bit before, was, the real work that went behind the effort to search the landfills. I think when you're looking at something as complex of each of those jurisdictional issues that are a part of it, when at the end of the day the right thing to do is to search the landfill for those missing women. And I think being able to have supported some of those conversations and to see that happen, and also I was out of the government when the women were found, but I think to how much I think that had impacted me to see that was the result, and that was the ultimate end result, meant a lot. I think there was also, in this space, I did a lot of work also in kind of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls space. And so when we're talking about missing women across the country, and being able to help support those conversations as well, I think that was, those were some of the most impactful things that I got to be a part of. And I think in terms of, particular anecdotes, I think, the coolest thing ever, to be a woman, to be an Indigenous person, to be, someone who was able to advise the Prime Minister of this country, wouldn't have happened. I was the first inaugural Senior Indigenous Affairs Advisor in the Prime Minister's office. And I think to have kind of that title, means that, we still have so much more to go. And, and so 10 years ago versus, where we're going, I'm really excited to see where that goes and what more we can do to build on that.
True. And also congrats. You've done some pretty amazing work in your short years already. So keep up the good work. We're so lucky to have had you on today. And thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your work. And thank you so much. Yeah, for joining us on the show today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Today's episode featured Deliah Bernard, partner at Root Strategies, whose insights remind us that reconciliation is not a single action, but an ongoing practice rooted in relationships, respect, and listening. Her work highlights the importance of centering Indigenous voices, supporting self-determination, and approaching collaboration with humility and care. Thank you for listening to On the Way Home. Stay with us for more conversations that deepen our understanding of home, community, and belonging.
You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.